If you've ever driven through thick fog, you know how it feels. The world gets quiet, your vision shrinks, and suddenly, you're completely alone. But what if you're not? These are 3 real horror stories where people encountered something in the fog, something that shouldn't have been there, something that followed them, watched them, and in some cases, got dangerously close. Whatever hides in the fog, it doesn't always stay hidden. Dark Side Rewind presents 3 disturbing true fog horror stories. Turn off the lights, put your headphones on, and let's begin. This happened in late November of 2023. I live in upstate New York, just outside a small town called Kingston. It's one of those places where everything shuts down early, especially once winter starts creeping in. By 7 p.m., the roads are usually empty, and the further you get from town, the darker and quieter it gets. I work maintenance for a logistics company, and occasionally I have to drive out to one of our storage facilities that sits way off the main highway. It's not exactly remote, but it's isolated enough that you won't see another car for miles, especially at night. That night, I got a call around 8:30 p.m. saying one of the refrigeration units had gone down at the secondary warehouse. If it stayed off too long, we'd lose thousands of dollars worth of product. So I grabbed my tools and headed out. The drive usually takes about 25 minutes. About 10 minutes in, I noticed the fog. At first, it was light, just a thin haze sitting low over the road. Nothing unusual for that time of year. But within a few minutes, it got a lot worse. Like, noticeably worse. The kind where your headlights just bounce back at you instead of lighting anything ahead. I slowed down to around 30. The road I was on eventually branches off into a narrow service road that cuts through a stretch of forest before reaching the warehouse. No streetlights, no houses, just trees on both sides. That's where the fog got really bad. I'm talking visibility down to maybe 10 or 15 feet. I remember thinking I should probably pull over and wait it out, but there's nowhere safe to stop on that road. It's barely wide enough for 2 cars, and there's a shallow ditch on both sides. So I just kept going, slow, careful, eyes glued to the faint outline of the road ahead. That's when I saw the truck. It was sitting on the side of the road, maybe 20 feet ahead of me when it finally came into view. An old pickup, dark colored, just parked halfway off the road with its headlights off. I slowed down even more as I approached. There was no hazard lights, no movement, no sign that anyone was inside. I figured maybe it had broken down. As I passed it, I glanced over. The driver's side door was open. That's what stood out to me. Wide open, like someone had just stepped out. But there was no one there. I kept driving, but something about it didn't sit right. I hadn't passed any other cars the entire drive. And for someone to just leave their truck like that, door open, in the middle of nowhere, it didn't make sense. Still, not my problem. I drove for another minute or 2. Then I saw the same truck again. I swear to God, it was the same one. Same shape, same dark paint, same door hanging open. This time, it was on the opposite side of the road. I actually said, "No way," out loud. There are no intersections on that service road. No alternate paths. No way for that truck to get ahead of me without passing me, and I hadn't seen a single set of headlights. I slowed down almost to a stop as I passed it the second time. And this time, I noticed something else. There was someone sitting in the driver's seat. I hadn't seen them the first time. They were just sitting there, completely still, facing forward. I couldn't see their face clearly because of the fog and the angle, but I could tell they weren't moving. Not even a little. No turning their head. No reaching for anything. Just sitting there. I kept driving. I didn't want to stop. About 30 seconds later, I checked my rearview mirror, and that's when my stomach dropped. The truck was behind me, headlights on, right on the road, following at a distance. I didn't see it turn around. I didn't see it start up. It was just there. I felt my chest tighten. I sped up slightly, pushing maybe 40, which was honestly too fast for those conditions. The truck stayed behind me. Same distance. Not gaining, not falling back. Just there. I tried to tell myself it was coincidence, that maybe it had been running the whole time and I just hadn't noticed. But then the road curved slightly to the right, and for a brief second, the fog thinned just enough for me to see further ahead. There was another set of headlights, coming toward me. I slowed down immediately. The road was too narrow for 3 vehicles to comfortably pass, especially with that kind of visibility. The oncoming headlights got closer, but something felt off. They weren't moving right. They weren't getting bigger the way headlights normally do when a car approaches us. They were just there, like they were fixed in place. And then it clicked. Those weren't oncoming headlights. That was the same truck. Again, parked on the side of the road. Driver's door open. I slammed the brakes harder than I should have. My car skidded slightly, but I managed to stop. I was now sitting between 2 identical trucks. One behind me, one ahead of me. Both in the fog. Both exactly the same. My hands were shaking at that point. I didn't know what to do. I glanced in the rearview mirror. The truck behind me was closer now. Too close. And then I saw movement. The driver's door slowly started to close. Not slam, not pushed, just slowly swing inward. I didn't wait. I floored it. I swerved slightly to the left, squeezing past the truck ahead of me. As I passed, I forced myself not to look inside. I just couldn't. I kept driving. Didn't stop. Didn't slow down. Within maybe a minute, the fog started to thin. And just like that, I was out of it. Clear road. No trucks. Nothing behind me. Nothing ahead. I made it to the warehouse, fixed the unit, and drove back the same way about an hour later. There was no fog. And there were no trucks. No tire marks. No signs that anything had ever been there. I tried to convince myself I imagined it. That the fog, the darkness, and the isolation just got to me. But there's one thing I can't explain. When I got home, I noticed something on the side of my car. A long scrape, like something had dragged along the passenger side. The paint was chipped all the way down to the metal, and mixed into it was a dark, almost black residue. Not dirt, not paint, something else. I never reported it. I never went back down that service road at night again. And to this day, I still think about that moment, sitting between those 2 trucks in the fog, and realizing one of them had just been behind me seconds earlier. This happened last October. I'm from Oregon, just outside a town called Bend. If you've never been out there, it's a mix of suburban neighborhoods and wide stretches of forest that start basically right at the edge of town. It's a great place if you're into hiking, trail running, stuff like that. I've been running trails out there for years. There's one trail in particular called Fogline Trail, kind of an unofficial name locals use. It cuts through a dense section of pine forest about 10 minutes from my house. It's not marked on most maps, but people who live around here know it. It's a straight, narrow path that loops about 4 miles total. I've run it dozens of times. Never had an issue. Until that day. It was a Saturday afternoon, probably around 4:30. The weather had been normal all day. Clear skies, a little cold, nothing unusual. But right as I was getting ready to head out, I noticed the fog starting to roll in. And I mean fast. Within maybe 10 minutes, the visibility dropped to where I could barely see down the street. That should have been my sign not to go. But I figured it'd be fine. I knew the trail like the back of my hand. There's no forks, no alternate paths. You go in, follow the loop, and come out where you started. Simple. So I went anyway. I parked at the usual gravel pull-off and started running. The second I entered the tree line, the fog got worse. It was like stepping into a different environment entirely. The trees blocked what little light was left, and everything past maybe 15 feet just disappeared into gray. It was quiet too. Too quiet. Usually, you hear something, wind, birds, leaves moving, but that day it was dead silent. Still, I kept going. For the first mile or so, nothing felt off. I was running slower than usual, just being careful with my footing, but everything else was normal. I even checked my watch around the 1 mile mark. Pace was fine. Distance was tracking. No issues. The problem started around mile 2. At that point in the loop, there's a slight downhill section followed by a long straight stretch. I know it well because it's where I usually pick up speed. But that day, the downhill never came. The trail just kept going straight. At first, I thought I just misjudged where I was. Fog can mess with your sense of distance, so I figured I was just earlier in the loop than I thought. Then I checked my watch. 2.3 miles. That didn't make sense. I should have already passed that section. I slowed down, trying to get my bearings, but everything looked the same. Same trees, same narrow path, same fog, no landmarks. Nothing to distinguish one part of the trail from another. I kept running. Another few minutes passed. I checked my watch again. 2.8 miles. Still no downhill. Still no change in the trail. That's when I stopped. I stood there for a second, just listening. And that's when I heard it. Footsteps. Behind me. Not loud. Not fast. Just steady. Like someone walking at a normal pace on the trail. I turned around immediately. There was nothing there. Just fog. I stood still, trying to listen again. At first, nothing. Then, one step. Crunch. Another. Crunch. It was faint, but it was there. And it was definitely coming from the direction I had just run from. I called out, "Hello?" No response. The footsteps stopped. Completely. That silence hit harder than the sound itself, because it felt like whatever it was didn't want to be heard unless I was moving. I didn't wait. I turned around and started running again. Faster this time. I didn't care about pacing anymore. I just wanted to get out of there. After maybe 30 seconds, I heard it again. The footsteps, matching my pace. If I sped up, they sped up. If I slowed slightly, they adjusted too. Always the same distance behind me. Never closer. Never further. I didn't look back again. I couldn't. I just kept running. My breathing got heavier. My legs started burning, but I didn't stop. I checked my watch mid-run. 3.5 miles. That was impossible. The entire loop is only 4 miles. I should have been nearing the exit, but I was still deep in the forest, still surrounded by fog, still on the same endless path, and those footsteps were still there. Then something changed. The footsteps stopped again, but this time, something else started. A voice, low, right behind me. Not loud, not yelling, just speaking. I couldn't make out words at first. It sounded like whispering, but stretched out, like someone was dragging their voice. I slowed down without meaning to, and that's when I heard it clearly. My name, spoken softly, right behind my ear. I froze. Every instinct told me not to turn around, so I didn't. Instead, I took off running again. Full sprint. I didn't care if I tripped or collapsed. I just ran. The voice didn't follow. The footsteps didn't come back. It was just me and the sound of my own breathing. After what felt like forever, I saw something ahead. The tree line breaking. Exit. I ran out of the trail and onto the gravel road so fast I nearly slipped. I stopped and turned around. The fog was still thick inside the woods, but I could see the entrance clearly now. And there was no one there. No movement. No sound. Nothing. I stood there for a minute, trying to process what just happened. Then I looked down at my watch. 4.1 miles, which didn't make sense, because based on how long I'd been running, it should have been closer to 6. I didn't go back in. I just got in my car and left. I haven't run that trail since. But here's the part that really stuck with me. Later that night, I was cleaning up, and I noticed something on the back of my calf. Dirt, but not normal dirt. It was smeared, like a handprint. Long, narrow streaks, like fingers had dragged across my leg. From behind. I live alone. No one was out there with me, and I know for a fact I never stopped long enough for someone to catch up. This happened in January of 2021. I used to work as a seasonal caretaker at a lighthouse off the coast of Maine. It wasn't one of the big tourist ones. This place was small, isolated, and only accessible by boat. During peak season, they'd have staff rotating in and out, but in the off-season, it was usually just one person staying out there for weeks at a time. That winter, it was me. The job itself was simple. Maintain the generator, keep the light operational, log weather conditions, and report anything unusual. Most of the time, nothing ever happened. It was quiet, peaceful, even. But the fog out there, the fog was different. If you've never experienced coastal fog in the middle of winter, it's hard to describe. It doesn't just sit on the water, it swallows everything. Sound gets distorted. Distance doesn't feel real. And once it rolls in, You're completely cut off from the mainland. No boats, no visibility, nothing. About 2 weeks into my stay, we got hit with one of the thickest fog banks I'd ever seen. It rolled in overnight. When I woke up, I couldn't see the shoreline from the tower, and that's only about 100 yards away. The world outside had just disappeared. That day started normal enough. I did my usual checks, logged the weather, made sure the light mechanism was functioning. Everything was fine. The fog didn't bother me at first. It was part of the job. But by the afternoon, things started to feel off. The fog wasn't lifting, not even a little. And the sound, that's what I noticed first. Usually you can hear the ocean constantly out there, waves hitting rocks, wind cutting across the water. But that day, everything sounded muted, like the island had been wrapped in something. Around 3 p.m., I heard the bell. There's an old fog bell mounted near the base of the lighthouse. It's not automatic. It hasn't been in years. It's just there as a relic from when someone used to manually ring it during low visibility. But I heard it, clear as day. One slow, heavy ring, then silence. I assumed it was the wind at first. Maybe something shifted or the mechanism moved on its own. So I grabbed my coat and went down to check. The second I stepped outside, the fog hit me. It was thick enough that I couldn't even see the edge of the building behind me after walking maybe 10 feet. I made my way toward where the bell was mounted. It was still, completely still. No movement, no sway, nothing that would have caused it to ring. I stood there for a minute listening. Then I heard it again. The bell. One single ring. But this time, it didn't come from in front of me. It came from somewhere out in the fog, further away, like there was another bell out there. I turned slowly, trying to figure out where it came from. But there was nothing to see, just gray in every direction. I went back inside, locked the door, told myself it was just the fog messing with sound. That's what it does. That night is when things got worse. The lighthouse runs on a rotating light system, and part of my job was to check it every few hours during storms or heavy fog. Around midnight, I climbed up to the top. Everything was working fine. The beam was cutting through the fog as best as it could. But as I stood there, looking out into the nothing, I saw something. A light, far out in the water. It was faint, flickering, but it was there. My first thought was a boat, which didn't make sense. No one should have been out there in those conditions. I watched it for a minute. The light didn't move, didn't drift, didn't get closer or further. It just stayed there, flickering. Then, it blinked out, gone. I stood there for another minute, waiting for it to come back. It didn't. I went back down, tried not to think about it. Around 2 a.m., I heard the bell again. This time, it rang twice, slower, heavier, and closer. I didn't go outside. I stayed where I was. But then I heard something else. Footsteps, outside the door. Slow, wet, like someone had just come up from the water. They moved across the wooden deck, stopped right outside. Then, a knock, 3 times. I didn't move, didn't breathe, didn't make a sound. Another knock, same pattern, then silence. I stayed like that for what felt like hours. Eventually, I must have fallen asleep in the chair, because the next thing I remember, it was morning. The fog was still there, unchanged. I didn't want to open the door, but I had to check. So I did, slowly, carefully. There was no one there, no boats, no movement, nothing. But the deck was wet, and there were footprints, bare footprints, leading from the edge of the dock, up to the door. I followed them with my eyes. They stopped right where I had heard the knocking. I didn't step outside. I didn't follow them back. I just closed the door, locked it, and called it in. They pulled me off the island later that day once visibility improved. I told them everything. They didn't have much to say about it. Just wrote it off as stress, isolation, maybe auditory hallucinations. But here's the thing. Before I left, I went up to the tower one last time, just to make sure everything was shut down properly. And when I looked out into the water, the fog had finally started to clear, just enough for me to see the surface. And about 50 yards from shore, there was something floating, a small wooden rowboat, old, dark, and empty. No oars, no motor, nothing. just drifting there, exactly where I had seen that light the night before. I didn't stay long enough to look any closer. I left that island that day, and I never went back. But sometimes I still think about that night, hearing that bell ringing out in the fog, and something knocking on the door after walking out of the ocean. So yeah, those were 3 of the most disturbing fog encounters I've come across. And the thing about fog is, it doesn't just hide what's out there, it hides how close it really is. If you made it this far, I want to know, which story actually got to you the most? Was it the trucks on that empty service road, the footsteps following through the trail, or whatever knocked on that lighthouse door? And more importantly, what would you have done differently in that situation? Let me know down in the comments. I read every single one. And if you've ever experienced something like this, especially in the fog, feel free to share your story. You might see it featured in a future video. If you enjoyed this, make sure to subscribe for more real horror stories every week. Until next time, stay aware, stay careful, because sometimes you don't need to see what's out there to know it's already watching you.